Hiroshima, what have you done? You tried to control the power of the sun. And when the earth shook, it started a war. Death floats in the air and it washes ashore.
The missile will come in, or the bombs, at 20 times the speed of sound. You won't even hear them. They'll explode here with 6 times the heat inside the center of the sun. And this is ground zero. It will dig a hole 3/4 of a mile wide and 800 feet deep, turning us, the buildings, and the earth below to radioactive fallout shut up in the mushroom cloud. 5 miles in all directions, everyone's vaporized. 20 miles from here in all directions, everyone will be lethally burnt, lying in what remains of the buildings and what remains of the streets. People will be sucked out of buildings by winds of 500 miles an hour, turning into missiles traveling at 100 miles an hour. Windows popcorn, shards of glass decapitating people. And then the whole area will be engulfed in a huge firestorm of 3,000 square miles. Even in winter in Boston, everything will burn. And as these fires burn, huge amounts of black radioactive smoke are shot up into the stratosphere all over the country, and the fires will coalesce right across America, east to west, north to south, and the whole country will burn. And as these cities burn all over the world, there'll be millions of corpses. But you can imagine what devastation it would be. We are close to that. We are like lemmings walking blindly towards the cliff of nuclear annihilation, worrying about things that don't matter.
This is Dateline News and Conversation. I'm recording the show today at about 9:30 my time in Russia, but my guest is in Australia. She's become a friend and somebody very important in my life. I'll introduce her to you, and this will be a bit lengthy because I think it's important to establish right away who she is. My guest is Dr. Helen Caldicott. She's an Australian physician, author, and a anti-nuclear activist. She's founded several organizations dedicated to opposing the use of nuclear power, depleted uranium munitions, nuclear weapons, nuclear proliferation, and military action in general. In 1966, she began a 3-year fellowship at Harvard Medical School and later taught pediatrics at the Harvard Medical School. Her interest in nuclear issues came about after reading a novel about a nuclear holocaust set in Australia, On the Beach. And I saw a movie based on that book, and it was really horrifying and brought the danger and threat of nuclear war to me very clearly. She left a medical career in 1979 after visiting the Soviet Union to concentrate on calling the world's attention to the insanity of the nuclear arms race. Now, the story and her career in terms of a anti-nuclear activist is much larger than that. We'll get into some of it in just a bit. But she recruited 23,000 physicians to the organization Physicians for Social Responsibility. In 1985, this organization was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize with several other organizations Helen founded. Dr. Helen Caldicott, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Regis.
Well, Helen, it's so good to see you. And I didn't add this in this this lengthy introduction, but I want to point out right now before I forget it, to all of my viewers, I made a film called 30 Seconds to Midnight. I made that film in 2016 because I was afraid of what I thought was the imminent possibility of a nuclear war between the United States and Russia. And that is the reason that I came to Russia in 2016 to find out for myself what these Russians were really like. So I owe a great deal of gratitude to Helen. She starred in that film. And maybe starring in a film is not the right word, but she played a major role in that film, for which I'm really grateful. So, Helen, I'd like you to take us back to 1979, when your visit to the Soviet Union changed your life. What happened?
Well, we went there with the American Friends Service Committee, the Quakers, and we had a lot of appointments with Russian politicians, etc. And it turns out that they were very worried about America, and worried about the fact that America was going to deploy cruise missiles. Cruise missiles are small missiles that fly just above the ground, containing a nuclear weapon, and seek out their target. And they can't be verified from space like normal missiles that go out into space and come down again. And they were very worried about that. And I knew that the Americans really didn't care. And that worried me a lot. And so I think after that, I decided to leave Harvard and leave the practice of medicine, much to my dismay, because I felt that preventing nuclear war was sort of practicing global preventive medicine, and that was more important than just treating my patients.
So, Helen, you felt you had to alert the world. So you began speaking almost constantly after leaving your medical practice. So I want to know, where did you speak? Was it just in the United States? Was it all over the world? And I'd like to know what response you got from people who saw you and heard you.
Well, at PSR, we used to hold symposia on the medical effects of nuclear war. And we had one, a very big one in California, in Los Angeles. And there was a film agent who had heard about me and came to hear me. And after I gave the final address, and she said she wanted to work for me, and I said, I can't afford you. And she said, I'll do it for free. Well, she was the agent for Tom Cruise, Sally Field Lily, all the total top film stars, brilliant in Hollywood. And working for me, she got me into Vogue, Lifetime, Ladies' Home Journal, on television with Merv Griffin, Phil Donahue, you name it. So what happened was, through Pat Kingsley, I was able to educate the American people about the medical effects of nuclear war. And I would typically drop the bomb on them and describe what would happen to them and how they'd be vaporized and huge firestorms and the like. And I became actually quite a good public speaker. And the Americans are a bit easy to talk to and fairly easy to manipulate, should I say that? So I became an actress, really. And people would leave my talks in tears, which was appropriate. And over time, I used to give 3 speeches a day in 3 different cities to audiences ranging from, a couple of hundred to several thousand. And through the television and the radio and these speeches, I was able to actually educate the American people, and they became very frightened. And from this work, a film was derived called The Day After, which was bombs dropping on an American city. And almost all the Americans watched that film, and it was very frightening. And I also gave a talk in Hollywood to a group of film stars. I walked in and there was Paul Newman, and he kissed my hand and I nearly fell on the floor. And I gave a talk to them, and a woman came up to me afterwards and said, I think you're the only person on earth who can change my father's mind. And that was Patty Davis, Reagan's daughter. So she arranged a meeting with Reagan at the White House in the downstairs library in which there were no books. And I spent an hour and a quarter with Reagan alone, the longest time anyone ever spent alone with him. Patty was there, she said nothing. He read to me from the Reader's Digest. I had to correct him about a whole lot of things. He didn't know much. I held his hand intermittently because he needed reassurance. I don't think, well, I'm in his autobiography. I don't know if I made a difference, although maybe I did. And that's after all of this activity, that's when he went to Reykjavik to meet Gorbachev. And over that weekend, those two mere mortals almost agreed to abolish nuclear weapons. But Reagan was hung up on Star Wars, which was absolutely ridiculous. To hit the weapons as they were coming towards America would never work. Gorbachev knew it wouldn't work. He was highly intelligent. And he should have said, okay, have Star Wars, but let's abolish nuclear weapons. And they didn't. So that was a dreadful time in the Earth's history, a dreadful time in the Earth's history.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that you spent that time with Ronald Reagan. And I can say with almost absolute certainty that without your talking to him for that hour plus, he would not have gone to Reykjavik to meet with Gorbachev. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
Because I've become very good friends with the now deceased Suzanne Massey, who spent 40 years in Russia. She's an author. And she spent some time with Reagan, and he asked her, should I trust the Russians? And there's a book written about it. And she said, trust but verify. And that became the kind of a slogan.
That was his slogan.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, wow, that's really interesting. Now, you talked all across the United States. Did your message get out to like Europe? I
went to Canada. I went to almost most major cities in Europe, Australia, New Zealand. Yeah, I went all over the world,
And how were you received in these other countries?
With great respect.
Wow.
People
Was it the same kind of reaction that you got from Americans, maybe because of the fear of nuclear war between the United States and Russia? But did other people in these other countries kind of feel that sense of urgency as well?
Absolutely, they did, because of course, if we have a nuclear war, it's like in that book that you quoted, On the Beach, set incidentally in the city where I lived in Melbourne, Australia. And that started me off on the whole thing. And people were very aware that everyone's going to die. And there'll be a nuclear winter, and the clouds from all the firestorms set off by all the nuclear weapons will rise into the sky, block out the sun for up to a year or two, and there'll be a new ice age, and we'll all die of starvation and coldness and the whole thing. And it's all set ready to go on hair trigger alert. And a man wanders around after the president with a suitcase called the football, which has all the codes in it for him to start a nuclear war. And he has a 3-minute decision time, because if they think the weapons are coming from Russia, he has 3 minutes to set off his missiles before they get destroyed by the Russian missiles. And then the Russians have set up a thing called the dead hand. And I met the man who set that up, a lovely Russian man. And they were worried that if Moscow was hit first, then Putin or whoever would not be able to launch his nuclear weapons. So the dead hand is set in a mountain in the Urals. And if they note weapons coming from America, this will automatically launch Russian missiles without needing a Russian leader to launch them. So it's called the dead hand. I've got the book right here. And that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah. And Helen, what's even more terrifying is that in the last few years, Russia has developed hypersonic missiles that have the ability to change course and direction. Supposedly, they're going so fast that they cannot be shot down. And from what I'm reading from some Russian experts and other military experts, the United States does not have anything like this. In fact, might be 10 years behind Russia in terms of their nuclear capability and their radar, which can scan beyond the horizon. So it's even more frightening today. And I would wonder if that somebody in the Pentagon or some of these people, some adults in the room around Trump, might realize that Russia really is far more powerful. And anyway, nobody wins in any
Well,
of
it's
this.
not. It's not more powerful. They're both as powerful as each other. They're both equally powerful, and they're nuts. Now, the one thing I do approve of about Trump is that he doesn't like war. And so if I'd been an American, I would have voted for him, much to my partner's absolute disgust. She's American. But he's not very bright. And he's in the hands of really very, very dangerous right-wing fascists. And I think we're just lucky to still be here. That's the truth.
Yeah,
And
and
also this Ukrainian thing, they're moving American missiles into other countries in Europe now, when they were removed before. And Putin has used the word nuclear before. I doubt if he'd do it because he'll be killed too. But at a time of high international tension, you never know what these madmen will do.
yeah, and we can all be thankful, in my opinion, that President Putin has reacted with extreme caution and patience at the ever increasing threats and provocations coming from the United States through the mouths supposedly of NATO and the EU. But everybody here knows that it's the United States that's really in direct
Yeah, but
conflict.
he was a silly idiot to invade the Ukraine and use his weapons there. I mean, that was very provocative, and he's still doing it. And he's still bombing and killing people in the Ukraine. And so, of course, NATO is going to get together and say we have to oppose this. So he set the whole thing up.
Yeah, and there's a great deal of difference of opinion on that, especially here in Russia. But that's a topic for another.
Well, how can there be a difference of opinion? Because he started bombing the Ukraine. And I know why he did it. Americans set it up because they wanted the Ukraine to join NATO. And he doesn't want the Ukraine to join NATO because once Ukraine was actually part of Russia. And so it's these strong men with their testosterone pumping against each other. Don't you do this? But now they're armed with nuclear weapons to blow up the planet. But the thinking is still the same as all the wars, the Greek wars, the wars throughout history. But they've got nuclear weapons now.
So let me ask you this, Helen, in terms of what's going on in the Ukraine, whether Putin was right or wrong, do you feel that given the rhetoric, the increasingly belligerent rhetoric coming from the EU and the United States and the Russian response to what it will do to that, do you feel, like I do, we're closer to nuclear war now than we've ever been before?
Yeah, possibly. Yep. I mean, who knows? And there could be accidents in the early warning system. People make mistakes. Things are very tense. Both countries are very belligerent. And yeah, I think we could easily have a nuclear war.
Yeah.
And I'm just becoming, I'm a great grandmother now to two babies. And, I keep thinking I'm glad I'm old because of what's happening in the world and with global warming, etc. But what about these gorgeous children?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. You and I are in the same decade here in terms of age. I'm a little bit younger than you are, but I worry about my three kids, my five grandchildren, and
Yeah.
and this horrible situation that we've left them in these last 80 or so years. So I want to continue on your mission, Helen, because I think it's really incredible, and I want people to understand how important your mission has been. And I'm going to reference now something you did, which is really amazing. Well, I guess it's not so amazing when you figure you had all that publicity, you had all that Hollywood stuff behind you, but you managed to recruit some 23,000 physicians to the organization Physicians for Social Responsibility. And that organization and others that you founded in 1985 was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Tell me about the role that these physicians played, and then you might have comment on what it was like receiving the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, I didn't go. The truth is that some male physicians took credit for all my work and got the prize hung around their necks. For that, I'll never forgive them and I'll never recover. I wasn't there. I'd done all the work. So what happened was a young doctor came to see me from the Cambridge City Hospital, and there was a moratorium coming up in the Cambridge Council to ban all nuclear activity in Cambridge. Well, you know, Harvard does experiments with nuclear isotopes. MIT has a nuclear reactor. And so there was a lot of concern about this. And so Ira came to see me. I think I'd already written the book Nuclear Madness about the dangers of nuclear power. And I turned to Ira as we were talking and I said, you know, Ira, this is a medical issue, nuclear war. And so I said, let's start a medical organization. And we found out that an organization called Physicians for Social Responsibility in the 60s had existed, and they did studies on teeth of children to find if there were isotopes in the teeth from radioactive fallout. And then they sort of died, but there once a treasurer still existed, and he said, look, it's still registered in the state of Massachusetts. Why don't we just use that name? And we did. We had a meeting. And what happened was, shortly after that, I wrote an ad for the New England Journal of Medicine of the dangers of nuclear power. Guess what? The day after that was published, 3 Mile Island melted down. So we were besieged by people joining PSR. That's how it happened. And as it went on, I used to travel around the country to hospitals all over the world and to do what's called grand rounds. Now, every week at every hospital, the doctors have a meeting where a neurologist presents some new data or whatever. And I was invited to give talks about both nuclear power and nuclear war. And in that way, I recruited many, many, many physicians in America. And I did that also in quite a few countries around the world. So we grew to about 23,000 doctors. And then there were chapters, and I taught the people in the chapters how to go on radio and on television and educate the American people. So it metastasized, and it was very, very powerful. And you know, we had 1 million people in Central Park because we'd educated the people about the dangers of nuclear war. I addressed the 1 million people. I thought, what am I going to do? So I dropped the bomb on them and vaporized them all. And I was quoted in the New York Times that week. It was the quote of the week. Anyway, yeah, we had an enormous impact. And of course, I traveled around Europe too, starting physician groups all over in all the European countries. So yeah, I think sort of almost single-handedly I did that. But you know, there was a guy in Physicians for Social Responsibility who was initially at the beginning of it and that was Bernard Lown, and he set up what's called International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, and he virtually stole my work, traveled around Europe denigrating me to the groups I'd started, who all adored me, and he lobbied for the Nobel Prize. At the same time, I was already nominated by Linus Pauling for the Nobel Prize. Linus said, don't lobby them. They don't like that. Well, guess what? They gave the Nobel Prize to this bloody man. I wrote him a letter when he was 101 and told him what I thought, but he never replied.
Well,
So
that's
what can you
horrible.
do?
Well,
I'm just
anyway,
a woman, another woman not getting recognition.
yeah. Well, I'm happy that we can memorialize that on this show, Helen. I didn't know that.
Oh,
There's no denying what you did, and certainly in the hearts and minds of millions of people in the United States and around the world. Helen Caldicott, she walks on water, and I have had so many people contact me, and after seeing my film 30 Seconds to Midnight, have told me how wonderful Helen is, and they've asked, how is she? And so I hope some of these people can watch this show and they'll see how good you're looking.
well, I said I was practicing global preventive medicine because I took the Hippocratic Oath, and that's what I was doing.
Well, I'm obviously duly impressed, even more so now than when I interviewed you back in Massachusetts over 10 years ago. Let me ask you this. How far have we come towards nuclear annihilation since then? And this is the main question. Why do people not seem frightened to death?
Because the people are not educated. They don't know. And because I'm not all over television and radio and in the printed press warning them. I'm 87 and I'm kind of near death's door, I suppose. And people just don't know. And as Jefferson said, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. That's my dictum, and it's absolutely true. So people don't know.
So to have an informed
They're
democracy,
they're sleepwalking towards annihilation.
yeah, and your quote opening up my film, and that you use many times, we're walking like lemmings toward
Yes,
nuclear annihilation. I love
yes,
that.
that's right.
So you said we need an informed democracy. Why is it that we don't have an informed democracy, in your opinion?
Well, I don't have Pat Kingsley doesn't work with me anymore. She's retired. She's in her 90s, a wonderful woman. And, Australian media takes virtually no notice of me. And I live in Australia now, not America. And it's just not happening.
Well, my reaction to that is a belief that I've held for a long time. It's part of the reason I'm in Russia and part of the reason I do what I do. We don't have an informed democracy anymore because the media has been co-opted and owned by a handful of individuals worldwide, and media has really become a propaganda arm.
Exactly, exactly. And I would blame Murdoch for most of that. He's an evil, evil man,
Uh,
fellow
yeah,
Australian.
yeah, no doubt about that, and he's not alone. There are a number of other
Oh,
people
yep,
who own other parts of media that come from the same background, the
yeah,
same
yeah,
orientation, and
yeah.
it's really frightening, and it's the reason why people in the alternative media and some very influential and important people who are speaking out about this issue and others are having a hard time breaking through, even though
I know.
some of them may have hundreds of thousands of followers. It doesn't cut it when you're looking at 340 million people in the United States, most of whom I think are probably just concerned with trying to earn a living and get by.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
rest, the rest seem to be quite well off, and they're filling the sports stadiums
that's
all over
right.
the country and probably all over the world because soccer, you look
Yep.
at soccer stadiums, they're absolutely filled. So I think there's a number of people who, the majority who are not yet feeling it yet, but I think it's coming now. You're in Australia. I want to finish with this question because I get asked it all the time. Are people in Australia aware of the the collapse of the United States in terms of its economy, its politics, its culture, its morality. Are people aware of that? Are people talking about it? Because I can tell you here in Russia,
Yeah.
either people really don't care, but not a lot of people really want to believe what I think is happening there. So I'm wondering what it's like in Australia.
Well, it's the same really in Australia. They do know, but what can they do about it? My partner is American. She lived in New York and she's devastated. The truth is, if I now wanted to go back to America, I wouldn't get through the passport initiation thing because they'd look up all my record and I wouldn't get into America.
In my opinion, it's become a totalitarian state, and
It
Trump's
is
behavior.
fascism.
I can't
I'd
thank
like to meet Trump. I'd like to meet Trump like I met Reagan and hold his hand and talk to him about what would happen if a nuclear weapon landed on the White House. Maybe I could convince him, but that won't
Well,
happen.
yeah, I wish that could happen as well. And I just can't thank you enough, Helen, for taking the time to come back on the show. You've become a very important person in my life and have influenced me tremendously. And I can only thank you and wish you good health and enjoy every day and every moment you spend in your garden, because that's where most of us need to be as well. Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
well,
Helen.
thank you, Regis. You're a lovely man.